Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for coming. So this session runs from 1:30 to 3:30. I'll be your session chair today. I'm Samantha Finnegan, Durham University Advanced Research Computing, RSE team lead. So we've got 4 talks in this slot today from Paul Caton, Riva Quiroga, Joe Warwick, and Alessandro Esposito about project requirements and implementation. The first talk is Paul, who is the Deputy Director and Senior Research Software Analyst at King's Digital Lab in London. And I had the pleasure of visiting King's for the Digital Humanities Summer School over the summer, so it's a lovely place to be. His talk arises from project experience while at KDL, which as a humanities-based RSE group occupies a particular niche in the overall RSE landscape. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, good afternoon. So yes, I work in King's Digital Lab. It is an RSE group which somewhat unusually is based in Faculty of Arts and Humanities at King's College London. For an Arts and Humanities RSE group, we are relatively large, 13 people, full-time. We cover a range of roles. A couple of those roles are sort of towards the lab admin, lab management side, but most of the roles have something to do with development. And, excuse me, the principal remit of the lab is to support, foster, and work with the research effort of the faculty. We do this in several ways, but the main work we do, the principal way that we support faculty research is we work with faculty scholars on grant-funded projects. Sometimes, if circumstances allow, we work with external partners. We work with a very large range of external partners, large institutions like the National Archive, British Museum, and we've worked with a wide range of academics from other UK universities. And we've worked occasionally with some government departments as well. But mainly we work with faculty scholars on grant-funded projects. Now, this part is one of the most important parts of my entire talk, because from this come all the things that have been keeping me awake at night over the last few years, chewing over the problems. So it's the context in which we do that project work. When we're working on a project with a partner, it's not the case that everyone in the team who's development oriented works on that project. Instead, we have an SDT, a solution development team assigned to the project. And typically it's a 3-person team. So there'll be an analyst like me, there'll be a UI UX designer, and there'll be a developer. Now, the next point is absolutely crucial. If you take nothing away from this, keep this in mind. Each member of the SDT is going to also be working on at least one other project at the same time, and not usually one other project, actually more like 2 or 3 other projects at the same time, as well as doing other work, lab-based work, sometimes sort of pre-project work, evaluating proposals, that kind of thing. And a similarly important point is the fact that in certain circumstances, an SDT member can be transferred from one project to another. We don't do this often. It's not something we like to do for obvious reasons. It's quite disruptive, but there are circumstances where it's necessary and it can happen. We tend to try and work normally to a calendar of fortnightly time boxes. And of course, in true agile fashion, the idea would be that within a time box, we focus the work on one project. But because we're working on multiple concurrent projects, and because you have project partners who can only meet at certain times, and there are certain events that need to be worked to and deadlines that need to be met, it's actually very difficult to achieve that focus within one time box on one project. Nevertheless, we do still try to be agile. The agile methodology that we follow in the lab is the agile DSDM method, if any of you know. I mentioned that we mainly work on grant-funded projects. Well, in the arts and humanities, very, very few people come to us with bundles of money clutched in their hot little hands. Instead, they come to us with an idea. And we talk to them about it. We discuss possible digital components. And if we decide that it's a good fit with our expertise and our overall research direction, then we'll work with them to develop their idea, develop their proposal. And what we give them at the end of those discussions when they're ready to submit is we give them what we call a KDL product quote. Now, a product quote is a formal document. It's a kind of a contract between them and us. We sign it, they sign it. And essentially what it is a description of the work that KDL will do on that project. And we describe that work in sort of two main ways. One is that we have a series of text sections, free prose text, where we'll talk about, okay, this is what the partner wants to do. These are the main digital components. Here's how we think we're going to do them. And then the other way we do it is that we produce a table of high-level requirements. And what you see there on the screen is a clip I took from an actual product quote. This went on to become a funded project, I'm happy to say. And this is exactly what they look like. So you've got an identifier for the requirement, that would be the number. You've got a letter representing the priority. This is the well-known Moscow system of priority: must, should, could, won't. In this case, requirements 7 and 8 were both must-have requirements. And then you've got the description, a very high-level description. One sentence for number 7, a couple of sentences for number 8. Oh, went too far. I went way too far. Why do we use high-level descriptions like that? We use high-level descriptions because, first of all, I don't know what it's like in STEM subjects, but in arts and humanities, typical funding applications, you're quite constrained as to how much you can actually write. And we're usually fighting with the project partner because they want to put all their stuff in about why they're doing the project. We generally don't have a lot of room. We don't have time to explain things in great detail. But that's not even a desirable thing to do because, again, in arts and humanities funding, it's quite common for there to be rather a large gap between when you put the funding application in and when work starts. It's usually at least 6 months. It could well be 9 months. It could sometimes be a year before you actually start work on the thing that you put into the product quote. And then thirdly, it accords with typical agile principles of starting with something that's more high level and kind of general, a bit vague, a bit sort of blue sky concept, and then you work your way down to something more specific through the famous rapid iterative prototyping. So if a project gets funded and the partner finally comes to us and says, right, we're ready to start, what does that mean? It means that we have to get from this that we wrote perhaps 9 months ago to something like this. This is in fact what we finally implemented from those requirements, high-level requirements 7 and 8. This is live on the web now. Actually, we ended up doing 7 and 8 as this one-page implementation. It turned out to be the most efficient way. The thing is that when you want to go from that to that, there's a lot to get through, okay? It's not a simple process. From the high-level requirement to the final output, you have to make your way through most of these, perhaps not all of them, but at least 3/4 of those you're going to encounter on the way. And we could be talking about a 3-year project, we could be talking about a 5-year project. AHRC projects can be 5 years, ERC are commonly 5 years. The takeaway message here is that requirements don't travel light. Okay, requirements bring a lot of baggage, all this baggage, and this baggage has to be handled. Obviously, we have access to tools which handle aspects of requirements. And these tools usually can handle at least one thing very well. Some of them do several things very well. We work with a range of tools at KDL. I just put up 6 of the more common ones here. There are others we use as well. But they're all pretty good at something. Slack is really good for certain kinds of conversation, very rapid, real-time conversations, quite good for asynchronous conversations where one person starts a thread and then other people join in as they start work later or come back from holiday. It's pretty good for that. It's terrible for archiving conversations, not great for searching them either, but it's pretty good for having them. Miro is a wonderful diagramming tool, especially if you want to just expand into infinite space with, say, a series of diagrams for multiple iterations of a prototype. It's great for that. CodeSpace, our designers really like that for coding prototypes. ClickUp is our current task management tool. I've seen a lot of task management tools. ClickUp, I think, is pretty good. I don't know if it's the best in the world. I haven't seen all of them, but it's pretty good. It's got a lot of functionality. If you can get past the rather steep learning curve, you can do a heck of a lot with it. Draw.io, great for formal models. The developers really like that. And GitHub, of course, you all know GitHub. So we've got these tools. I don't know what metaphorically this diagram brings up in your mind. You could think maybe, you know, hub and spoke kind of model, or some solar mass and orbiting planets. Doesn't matter. The point is that something needs to be in the middle of all those. All of those do some part well, but none of them cover the big picture. Something has to be in there. And the sad reason that I did it with this dotted red line and no text is because it ain't there at the moment. It's not there. And it's a huge lack in our workflow. And this is the problem I'm chewing over. What needs to go in there? Something needs to put in there. I need to put something in there to hold those things together in orbit, if you like, or connected by spokes. It doesn't matter, whatever metaphor most appeals to you, but there has to be something there to tie it all together. In thinking about what needs to go in there, these are the aims that I want to achieve. And the first one is fairly obvious, but it's the most important. Don't make life more difficult for the solution development team. It's already difficult enough. Have to relieve their burden, not add to it. It's incredibly easy to think, oh, I'll create this wonderful whiz-bang thing, and then you create it, and it turns out that you've just actually given them more work to do. The second thing, which is incredibly important, is provide answers. The one thing that SDT members need is answers constantly because of the context, the development context that I explained. They're hopping from project to project. Sometimes they may leave a project for 3-4 weeks and not work on it. And then they have to come back to it and get their mind into it. And all they have are questions. Where were we with this requirement? I remember we had a meeting. What was said at that meeting? What was the decision taken about it? What was it that I needed to do? Wasn't there some problem with this? And all those questions usually end up with me as the analyst, because that's my job, is to answer those questions. And without that thing in the center, I end up doing the work to find the answers. I can usually find the answers, but I'm doing a lot more work than I should be in having to find them. I need something that will give them answers and not generate more questions like, how do I work this? Where do I find so-and-so? Third one, foster co-ownership with project partners. This often happens to us is because of the nature of the way we work and the fact that academics are always busy. We say, yes, we'll work on a requirement, and then there's this kind of silence where we're working on it and they're doing their thing, but there's a gap and they don't have a sense of continuity as to what's happening. So if we can bring project partners and SDT closer to think about working on it together, that would be a great help. And then the last one is just general visibility in terms of within the lab, because the solution development team get close to requirements and they, eventually sort of understand what's happening. But if, for example, my colleague Alessandra, who's the project manager, needs to know, well, what's happening with this? Where are we with this requirement? Has this been done? She needs to be able to find answers without coming to me all the time. There needs to be a place that provides them. And in thinking about the principles that guide what it is that needs to be there, these are the ones that I think are most important. Top one, simplicity and complexity. If I'm building something to provide answers, there's a huge temptation to think of every possible question I might be asked and provide every possible answer. But that's going to contradict the idea of not making things more complex and burdensome to the users. So I think that the best principle here is to lean towards simplicity first and then add complexity if necessary, but generally try to keep it simple. The one directly below that is sort of related between comprehensiveness and succinctness. We often find, for example, in a requirement that there may be the SDT has its idea of how the requirement should be implemented, but the project partners have some other idea. Perhaps they've seen something fancy somewhere and they think, well, we want one of those. We feel, well, no, that's not the best way to implement it. So there's going to be some chewy discussions back and forth about that. There may be long email threads, there may be meetings, there may be Slack discussions. There's, again, a huge temptation to put all of that into this thing in the center for reference, but that's not a good idea because it's just going to be too much. So the principle here will be go for succinctness, go for the gist, the paraphrase, the summary, rather than everything. Only what is relevant to the requirement should be there. Sounds obvious, but actually, when you have something that's going to function as a record, the temptation is to put things in there, whether they really belong there or not. So there needs to be absolute discipline in terms of making them relevant to the requirement. And then the last one, delegation, goes back to what I was saying before. There are tools that are really good at some things, so let them do them. Let your complex diagrams be in Miro. And don't try and cram them or reduce them or put them into this thing. By all means, point out to them. And of course, as you point out to them, have some sort of little description or caption that says what it is you're pointing out to save people a wasted trip going from this to that. But don't try to put everything in there. Let the specialist tools do their specialist job. Just knit them together. So I'm calling this thing, for want of a better term, I'm calling this thing in the center a requirement record. And I've been thinking about what should a requirement record actually have. So I've gone back, as we often do, to our trusty Moscow system. And this is still in flux, so I'm not claiming this is how it'll end up. But at the moment, what I have under the must-have column are, first of all, what's the priority of the requirement? That seems obvious. It's the most important thing to know. Am I working on a must-have requirement? Am I working on a could-have? It makes a big difference. The second one, the description. Obviously, there has to be something that says, at the end of this requirement, when it is implemented, X will exist. What is X? What does it look like? What will it be? There are different ways that you could accomplish this description. It could be free text. It could be using, some of the well-known formulas for use cases. as an A, I want to build a B so that I can do C. It could be that. Doesn't really matter. This is something that your team can decide amongst themselves which format they prefer. But there has to be a description. There also has to be some indication of status. So between high level here and final implementation here, where are we? Are we still just here with a long way to go? Are we in the middle? Are we nearly at the end? There needs to be a quick, down and dirty way to find out what the status is. Now, you can draw on other tools for that. For example, you can tap into data from ClickUp about how many tasks have been done, but there needs to be some indication of status. Decision points is very important. I was saying, for example, if you've got a choice of implementations, method A, method B, and method A is chosen, why? There has to be a record of this was the decision and these were the reasons. And finally, under the musts, MVP outline. A minimal viable product description is really important because it tells you when is enough. There's a point in an implementation of a requirement when you've done enough that you can stop and move on to something else, which is often very important if you're running out of money, running out of time, or the partners just say, actually, we've decided this other thing is really important too. Can you work on that? Get to the MVP point, then you know you can move on. So that's important. Should have, these are important, but not life or death. Models and designs, generally don't put them in the record, but point out to them. Tasks, don't put them in the record. A requirement record is not a task management system. Have references to tasks, point to your task management system and say, these are the tasks that are being worked on by the developers and designers to do this requirement. Sign off, this is where the partners say, you know what, we're happy with this, it's done, here's our signature, you can move on to something else. Dependencies, can I do this requirement without having done this other requirement? That would be very useful to know. Justification, this is a bit of a strange one, but it's important to me because you wouldn't believe how many times I've had the question, why are we doing this? It should be obvious, but it's actually not. It goes all the way back to those discussions in the pre-application process. So having the partners say the reason we are doing this is because eventually it achieves the goal or part of the goal that we had when we first thought of this project. That's why we're doing it. And that link can be really important to have, because if you're a designer just coming into something from another project and you look at it and you say, I don't understand why we're doing this, that's what the justification does. Comms, I said about, say, an email chain, just give a digest, don't give the whole thing. Won't have tasks. Tasks do not belong in a requirement record. Tasks belong in a task management system, which is built to handle them, put them there, and don't have full record of comms. Okay, the final thing I want to mention, because it's a massive elephant in the room, is granularity. You could see in that example of 2 requirements and then the page that dealt with them, that page had a lot of aspects to it, which many of which could be regarded as kind of discrete chunks of work to do. You could think of them as sub-requirements of a requirement. How do you handle that? I have not decided on this yet. It's a big, big problem. You could put them all in one record at one level. That makes it quite big. You could use a hierarchical structure going down step by step from, overarching down to completely granular. Or you could have a kind of tree, family tree model where you've got the main requirement record and then sub-requirement records. But as to what you put into each of those sub-requirement records compared to that, I don't know yet. That's another thing that's keeping me awake at night. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, Slido questions. So from Tom Couch, with 1 developer per project, is there an opportunity for code review?
I'm embarrassed to say the simple answer to that is no, very little. We code review, we're well aware of this. Code review is something that we lack at the lab as a systematic part of our software development lifecycle. It's one of those things where we know we should be doing it, but we're not.
Thank you, Paul. So question there from Anonymous, how do you balance the on-costs of requirements gathering? I'd assume it's a case of the more requirements gathering you do, the more accurate a costing you can give, but it's all free work, pre-award. Is there a middle way?
Very, very good question. We're lucky that we have conveyed to Faculty of Arts and Humanities that, you know, the more work we can do pre-application in the requirements gathering, even if it's free work, and it's not free, at the end of the day, faculty are paying, it's not free in that sense, but the more work we can do, the better our cost assessment will be, the better the requirement description will be, and therefore the more efficiently the work will go if the project does get funded. Sometimes we've had occasions where people have come to us with a small amount of money, say, you know, a small internal college award, and what they want to do is explore a concept, maybe come up with either a working prototype or even just a kind of modeled prototype. And on those occasions, we've used that money to really go into a more detailed requirements gathering. And it's always been a very rewarding process from our point of view in terms of what comes out at the end as a set of requirements. And sadly, on a couple of occasions when I've done this, it's not ended up being a funded project. So the work has not had the final fruition, the final reward, but it is a great thing to do if we can do it, and it saves us a little bit of money.
Great, thank you, Paul. So I think we've got time for one last question. Have you considered existing tools for this requirement record, GitHub projects, Jira, etc.? If so, why are they not fit for purpose?
Yes, I look at tools all the time, but I deliberately didn't say, oh, I'm thinking of this for the requirement record thing. And I'll tell you why, because one thing that is coming very clearly from conversations with colleagues is that if it can be avoided, I should not impose another tool upon them. We already went through one quite long and traumatic move from our previous project task management system to ClickUp, and there was a great deal of learning involved for the team members, and most of them would like it if I could come up with a framework that uses the existing things we have rather than introduce another tool from outside. So that's not to say that there isn't a great tool that we could use that's separate from the ones I've got. What I'm going to do is look more carefully at all the tools we've got and see how I can shape the framework. If you want a metaphor for this, it's like instead of taking a compass and drawing a circle with a compass, you take an imaginary center point and draw a multiple series of tangents to create your circle. You've created the circle out of things sort of from the outside. So I'll be using all those tools and probably one main choice, which I think is probably going to be ClickUp, to put my framework together. It's a framework rather than a separate tool.
Thank you, Paul.